So, Leo, one of my teammates over in Lubuntu land wrote a bit of a controversial thing on Mastodon, looking to get some feedback. Essentially, well, before I spoil it, so the question really is, so why don't you use Linux, right? And the implication was the Linux desktop. Why don't you use the Linux desktop? This is from Aaron Rainbolt, and I think ultimately Aaron was looking to kind of address some of those things, at least as far as Lubuntu. You know, what's holding you back from using Linux as a desktop on a full-time basis? And so it's a valid question. It was a poll, and I'll have a link to it, and you can go find it over on Mastodon.
Yeah, his post said, what is it about the Linux distros you tried that made it or them unsuitable for you to use? If some problem or set of problems was fully resolved, would it be enough for you to be able to comfortably use Linux? It was a poll on the internet. You could choose too buggy, too unfamiliar, lacking any good alternatives to critical software, lacking critical software or alternatives aren't an option, overwhelming number of choices, as we see with this poll itself, incompatible with media I use, incompatible with my computer, simply didn't like it, or other, or what's Linux?
Yeah, what? Yeah. What now?
Yeah, he did hashtag Windows and Mac OS, so at least on Mastodon, it kind of it proliferated a little further out than just hashtag Linux, right?
Oh yeah, for sure, and it should. It's a good question. And obviously those are the people that you really want to send it to, and it also got posted on Twitter and it's in Reddit land as well. So you may have seen it around, and if not, I'll definitely link it back to the Mastodon post that started it all.
Yeah. When you look at the poll itself, or at least the one on Mastodon, because I saw this on Mastodon, I just I'm a little insular when it comes to social media, especially lately, because we've got the Lemmy and we've got the Mastodon, and I've really kind of fully embraced those, and I forget on a regular basis to post this stuff on Linux user space over to Twitter. Oops. So
fair.
So anyway, so I was looking at the Mastodon one, and the lacking critical software, alternatives aren't an option was the most popular by far at 28%. The next was 21%, and that was a comment. So it was probably a permutation of one or two or three or four of those options.
Right.
And that's, as soon as I got reading it, I didn't even have to read the options. That was number one.
That's number one on your list.
Exactly, right? What I was going to say. Yeah, exactly. Like, well, I can't get Photoshop. Well, I can't get my games to work. I can't get. And it seems like most people agree that software is the main driver that keeps them away.
And I think that's a fair criticism. However, I would say the gap is definitely closing, right? We see things all the time. And we also see alternatives, and I guess sometimes while there are comparisons and lists and tables and all sorts of stuff out there to kind of highlight, how certain pieces of software, that you would use in Mac OS or Linux or Windows are available as an alternative potentially in Linux. There's comparisons to get all of that together. I think one of the things that you and I try to do oftentimes on this show is highlight software that is available on all three platforms, at least all three of those platforms on a regular. That way, the platform that you choose is not standing in your way from using the software, I guess, right? So you can't you can't say that, it's just not available for me. Well, it is, because
right.
That's what we're trying.
Yeah, and we haven't done an app focus in a little while, but I told Dan the next time we do an app focus, I'm going to focus on local send, because this is another one of those apps that is absolutely 100% cross-platform. It works on absolutely everything. I toss files from my phone where I record video. I toss files from my laptop where I record the audio, all to my desktop where I do the editing. And it's such a seamless experience that it is irrelevant what operating system, if I'm using Windows to record on in Audacity that day, or if I'm on Linux, or if I'm on iOS, or I just have a lingering Android device that I'm using, or if I'm just on my Mac that day, whatever it is, that's a huge focus for me. But I think a lot of that comes from Linux as an afterthought for a lot of companies a lot of times, but not for the local send people. And that's why I use local send. That's why I've donated to local send. That's why I continue to look for software. Vivaldi's another one, but that's later. That I just absolutely have to use because it's everywhere. And it's device agnostic, machine agnostic, and it does not care what I use. That's super important to me. But I think it's coming from that, it wasn't available on Linux, so now I have to find something that's compatible. And now that's just kind of been part of my ethos.
Right. And so,
but it works.
Definitely that's one of the things that we try to highlight is there are things that, are multi-platform available, and we try to highlight that. We try to at least test them, to know if the functionality is wildly different between them. And for the most part, no. Let's hope that doesn't happen. But I guess that could be too, especially like you said, when Linux is not one of the thoughts and tests. It's not something that's getting tested. They're just creating software for one of the other, Windows or Mac OS, and then just tossing it over the fence to the Linux users. It may have problems, and that could sour your experience, right?
Oh, sure.
And if you're having a bad experience, if you have one bad experience, like especially on the first time, that might spoil it forever. I think, there's definitely that crowd out there that has had a bad time and they never want to revisit it again because it was such a bad time for them. I guess for those folks, I just want to say, sorry you feel that way, but that's really unfortunate because I think there's a lot of benefits that you can get from using the Linux desktop.
Yeah, things change, man. Especially, we've been talking about Wayland for quite a little while now, and that's one of those things that are a changing.
Right.
And for better or for worse, you have to poke it a little bit. I had a conversation on the internet about Wayland and its inability to be deployed for this person on a wider network of more than one machine, right? And one of the things that was holding it back was AnyDesk. AnyDesk does not support Wayland, but it's not impossible. And I think that's the impression that a lot of people get when they run AnyDesk and they see, or any software, and they see it's not Wayland compatible. I get that that's the one that they want to use, but a lot of times they just blame it on Wayland. And in a way, I guess you could, but when Rust Desk works just fine using the Wayland protocol, then I don't think it's a Wayland problem that they're holding on to X, but I get it, right? Because there's development cost in having to retool to get onto Wayland. It's not it's not some zero-sum game or anything like that. But it's just that AnyDesk will support Wayland eventually because the entire everybody's moving to Wayland. Red Hat dropped X, like an X server in RHEL 10. So,
which is a ways away. Like it's a ways away. I get it, but it's happening.
And RHEL 9 will be supported for years and years and years to come. So it's not like X is going anywhere. That's not what I'm saying.
Right.
But we're moving on.
Yeah.
Wayland will be the target and eventually will be the only target. So AnyDesk will happen.
Right.
It will be Wayland, but it's just not Wayland yet. So I think you get the perception, though, that when you're using AnyDesk and then you try to move to the newer software and it just doesn't support it, that it's the software, like the Wayland stack, that's at fault and not necessarily AnyDesk. And I don't think there's fault there.
Right.
I just think that you need a little more time to bake. And that's perfectly fine. That's what the LTSs are for. That's what that's what the LTSs are for. Stick on the LTS. If you need software to be able to count on that software for years and years, that's the point. Right.
Well, and I'll say, like, distributions will get lumped into the blame, category as well. Oftentimes,
for the same reasons.
For the same reasons, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And sometimes, and I'm not suggesting that people should shuffle around and do the distro hop dance all over the place, because that could be frustrating as well. So that's not a great suggestion. And I know that some people take exception to that. I have a Reddit post here that's a response that's not safe for work, if you will.
So we won't quote it directly.
I won't quote it directly. However, it is. I'm basically paraphrasing some of that, right? And I don't think it, as salty as the post is, it's somewhat justified, and I can totally appreciate and understand their view.
Oh yeah.
But it may lack, and I don't mean this to be critical necessarily, it may lack the ability to have an open mind, I guess, in some regard.
All right, so lay it on me. Why can this person not move over?
Oh, just because they thought it was terrible. They basically had a bad experience. Lots of incomplete things. And yes, all of this equates to software, but I think a lot of their point was specifically software that is part of the OS. Okay. And in regards to that, one of the examples that they cited was that they wanted to remove the Bluetooth package or Bluetooth backend, I guess, because their machine is a desktop and it doesn't have any Bluetooth. Well, that's fantastic.
And you can't take away my freedom.
Yeah, no, and freedom is a thing. It's supposed to be what you have, but I don't know that some of those core things necessarily should be removed. I mean, I guess you could look at Gentoo potentially and just not compile the Bluetooth components alongside of it. Maybe. But does that mean that the GNOME desktop would have a blank space where it says Bluetooth? No, I don't think so. I think it's still going to be there, and it just won't do anything. So you can't totally write it out of there.
Before you go on, hold on. I can take on the answer to that question because I have a Gentoo machine that I haven't compiled Bluetooth on yet. And yeah, when you open up settings, you go in the left and you can see where the Bluetooth should be, and you click on Bluetooth, and it's just like, no Bluetooth modules. I don't know what you want me to do here.
No.
And so it's just got a little Bluetooth logo, and that's it.
Yeah, but the menu is still there, and it's not totally wiped away from the machine. So, nor would I expect it to be, because guess what? In the other platforms that we mentioned, Windows and Mac OS, it still exists there too. And and you may have a machine that doesn't have Bluetooth or it's disabled or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, but this goes into that wider conversation that I've had in the chats, in our own chats, that I'm very much in favor of bloat. And that sounds controversial, but I don't think it really is when you peel it back to what it really means. Yeah. Bloat is just what the operating system is, and that a singular user has decided that that's too much. And I feel like that's the first step before someone is like, well, by the way, Arch. Yeah. Because when you end up in a situation like that, you're like, well, Ubuntu is too full fat for me. I need something slimmer. It's okay to debloat when you're building it yourself. Mm-hmm. But when you're taking
building
an Ubuntu,
for the mass?
But when you're taking as a user, when you're taking Ubuntu and you're deciding that Ubuntu adds too many things, I think you're out of the use case now of what Ubuntu is trying to target. You're no longer the target audience for an Ubuntu. I think people that use an Ubuntu are meant to just accept the bloat. Right. And I don't even necessarily think it's bloat. I think it's just the system.
Yeah.
When you start thinking in those terms of, well, this is bloat and this is bloat, and I'm going to take this off because freedom, I don't think that's what freedom meant. I think freedom that we're talking about is more freedom.
It does, but boy, you're really going to get in there and start doing some heavy patching in order to make that happen. But I guess you're welcome to fork all that stuff and go to town and start hacking away at it and removing all the Bluetooth components that are in the GNOME desktop. But that doesn't sound trivial to me. And I've seen some of those things, and I wouldn't want to go there.
I guess I need to see what he was seeing about the Bluetooth thing.
Right.
Because it sounded like the whole entire system melted down.
And maybe it would. Maybe there is a heavy dependency with the GNOME desktop on the thing that he was trying to remove.
Well, I guess if you're trying to target modern laptops, all modern laptops have Bluetooth.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's heavily used.
Yeah, yeah, of course it is. Now, whether or not Bluetooth is functional all the time, every time, that's a different conversation.
Oh, well.
And I've had my run-ins with that, and that's been hurtful.
Yeah.
Not amazing.
It's not always as convenient as you hope for, that's for sure.
You know, when you turn on your Bluetooth thing and it doesn't just automatically connect when it's the only thing it's ever connected to, or the experience could be better.
Yeah, when you say, "Can you hear me now?" a whole bunch of times, it might not be going well for you.
I don't know. I think the whole thing really does boil down to software. I know that there are issues like with Blue Z and Blueberry and all the Bluetooth things that can be a little hit and miss. But I think that's exactly why I use all the things. I use all the things. I don't think I've said that too terribly loud on the show, but I use all the things. As far as the show is concerned, I use a Linux stack to record and edit and all that kind of stuff, unless for some reason I accidentally blew up my Ubuntu that day.
Yeah.
So I'll say 99.5% of all the episodes have been done in Linux, but the vast majority of everybody else is just because the software is not there. Not because their onboarding experience was particularly bad or anything like that. Because, yeah, I think there's something that you have to do with Linux that you don't have to do with any operating system, and I think it's the real crux of the argument that says that, you know, Linux would get popular if you could buy one from Walmart or from.
They tried that.
Yeah, well, no, they didn't. No, they didn't, because everybody hated e-machines with Windows on it too.
Yeah, I know. The machines that got sold like that at Walmart were terrible.
Right, and I think that's why the framework does as well as it does, because it's a premium laptop, but you can put Linux on it, and I think there's an option for people to just put their operating system on it. But
yeah, it's a bit more of a first-class citizen there, in that they don't necessarily ship it with Linux on it, but they do some testing, and they're happy to work on issues that are related to Linux, right? So yes, yeah, I agree with that.
If we're gonna compare it to phones, right? Like it's taken an Apple phone, a new, you know, within 3 or 5 years Apple phone, and then within 3 or 5 years Android phone, and then putting it up against a Nexus 5 with UB ports on it, because that's what UB ports runs on. I know it runs on more, but you have these huge hardware discrepancies between the different offerings, and it's gonna color your decision if you buy it off the shelf like that.
Yep.
So, you know, I don't think we've done it. Not in a Dell front page, you know, half of the page when you get on there kind of way. We haven't done that. You know, Walmart doesn't have a $1,000 laptop.
Yeah, or Best Buy or Micro Center or any of those, right? Because that might be a better place to try to target some of that stuff, at least to start with, is like the Best Buys or the Micro Centers or someplace like that, where it's technology first. And so Walmart, I don't know, they're going to end up like that girl that got the laptop for Ubuntu 6.04 or whatever for college, and it like didn't read a DVD or something. Yeah. It's like, wait a minute, this is not right. Yeah. So I don't know. Yeah, that wouldn't be the greatest place to target, I think, initially, because it's not the right market, if you will.
Yeah, it's not.
But eventually, maybe someday. I don't know when that is, but yeah, whatever.
Yeah, I think there's also an undertone of you just have to kind of care. You have to kind of care about the operating system on your machine, because otherwise, why would you even consider it? Why is it even an option? You can't buy it from a shelf. So,
but you can. I mean, there are obviously the vendors that sell things with Linux on them, right?
Yeah, but because it's not a front page thing, you have to know about it in the first place to go searching for it.
Yeah, you have to have an interest. Yeah.
It's not in the public conscious. It's not a thing. So
yeah, you don't see billboards up there that, you know, are raving about the tuxedo.
Except with Lindos, they just got sued into the ground though. They're Linspire now and FreeSpire.
That might not be great though. Yeah.
I want to do a history episode on those guys because they're pretty fantastic, and the guy behind them, it might be a little rough around the edges, but he's pretty fantastic too.
Sure.
He's the one that said, you know, if you bought a super premium, super duper Lindos license, years and years and years and years later, he's like, yeah, I'll still
honor
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's what? Okay. That's really, really cool. So I do want to go back and do something about them because that would be fun. But yeah, I think that's it, man. It's not in front of you. So you've probably never even considered it. I'm surprised that the what's Linux option wasn't
higher.
Yeah, seriously. But maybe you've heard of it, right? But never even considered running it. And if you do consider running it, the first thing you're going to run into is the fact that all your software is not going to be immediately available to you. You can't get Apple Music on it.
Right.
I mean, you have to know the different software ways to get Spotify on it, and that's already half the reason people run computers.
Yeah. Well, I mean, some of those, there's like alternatives, right? Yeah, I mean, so like, I don't know if it still works or not, but like Cider was an option, right, for your Apple Music, right?
Oh, I paid money for that one. That one's fantastic, and I have an RPM, I have a Deb, I have a Windows executable, I have a DMG. Oh yeah, that was worth what was it, like $3 or something?
Right. So
100% worth it.
So totally exists, but you have to know that.
You got to know.
You have to know that it exists, or right? And so, I think that's half the battle is getting the education and piece component out there. That most of those things that you are trying to do, you can do. It's just not named the same sometimes, and it still works just as well, maybe better. Even there's better tools.
Well, it doesn't help that we name things Conqueror.
No.
Not that Firefox means web browsing, but
right. Yeah, no, naming is kind of crud, but there's all options.
I don't think it's bad. I just think we need to get away from this idea that software needs to say the name of the thing that it is.
That's true.
There's a description for that, but Yep,
I do.
Anyhow, why don't you use Linux? This is kind of a weird question come from a Linux podcast that you're listening to on whatever it is that you're listening to it on. So you probably do use Linux, but if you're not maining Linux, if Linux is not 51% of your computer usage, how come?
Yeah,
what is it?
Yeah, what's holding you back? What's keeping you away?
Is it the software? Please say yes so that I can be right.
Oh man, you got to say no now.
Okay, let me see. How do I do housekeeping? How does that even work? Don't forget, if you're watching this on YouTube, this doesn't apply to you, but we're on YouTube. If you're watching the history thing on TILvids, this also doesn't apply to you, but we're on TILvids too. And of course, if you like the stuff, if you like our insane, obviously way too long ramblings, the fact that we get cobwebs at least 2 times a season, if you like all that stuff, if you like the the opinions, the work that we put into it, the content that comes out of it, the community aspect, any of that stuff, if you like it, there's always patreon.com/Linux user space. But everywhere else, I mean, all the other stuff, just type in Linux user space. There's a good chance you'll find us probably on the top of the list if you're not on the Googles. I don't know if I haven't used Google search in a long time, so we might be on top up there. But, go find us and watch us and listen to us and stuff like that. So, there we go. Housekeeping with the cobwebs on.